Take a deep breath. Now imagine never being able to do that again without the stench of human waste, rotting food, and unwashed bodies filling your nostrils. You'd be dead within a month if you were transported back to Columbus's time, not from violence or starvation, but from something far more insidious. Your own immune system would betray you. The year is 1492. You step off a ship in any European port, and within hours, microscopic assassins begin their work. Your body, pampered by centuries of medical advancement and sterile environments, encounters pathogens that 15th century people lived with from birth. Smallpox, typhoid, dysentery, tuberculosis. These weren't just diseases back then. They were constant companions, culling the weak and leaving only the genetically resistant alive. But here's what's truly terrifying. The people of Columbus's era had survival rates that would shock you. In major European cities, nearly half of all children died before age 5. Not from accidents or violence, but from diseases your body has never learned to fight. Your immune system, trained on sanitized modern life, would crumble like tissue paper. The bubonic plague had swept through Europe just a century earlier, killing 1/3 of the entire population. Survivors carried genetic mutations that helped them resist disease. You don't have those mutations. Your ancestors who might have carried them likely perished in the plague years, and with them, potentially valuable genetic resistances were lost, narrowing the genetic diversity passed down to future generations. You're walking into a biological minefield with fragile armor. You're thirsty. In 2025, you turn a handle and drink clean water. In 1492, every drop of water is a potential death sentence. European cities dumped human waste directly into rivers, the same rivers they drew drinking water from. London's Thames was essentially an open sewer. Paris wasn't much better. People knew the water was dangerous, so they drank ale instead. Not for fun, for survival. The brewing process killed some of the bacteria, but even that wasn't safe. The alcohol content was low, and contamination was constant. Dysentery, cholera, and typhoid spread through water supplies like wildfire. Your modern digestive system, accustomed to processed foods and clean water, would rebel violently. Renaissance-era people developed gut bacteria that could handle the constant assault of pathogens. You haven't. The first cup of water you drink could trigger a diarrheal illness that would dehydrate you to death within days. Food preservation meant salting meat until it was nearly inedible or letting it rot in controlled ways. Cheese was aged in caves where rats left droppings. Bread was made with flour that contained insects, mouse droppings, and ergot fungus that caused hallucinations and convulsions. Meat was frequently spoiled. People couldn't tell good meat from bad by sight alone, so they relied on taste and smell. If it didn't smell completely putrid, it was considered edible. Food poisoning was so common that people expected to be sick after meals. Your stomach, trained on FDA-regulated food, would revolt against every meal. Vegetables were worse. Without refrigeration, root vegetables were stored in damp cellars where they sprouted mold and attracted vermin. Fruits rotted quickly and were often consumed in various stages of decay. The vitamins you take for granted, fresh citrus, leafy greens, clean dairy, simply didn't exist for most people. Bathing was considered dangerous. Medical experts believed that water opened the pores and let disease in. Most people bathed once or twice a year, if at all. Instead, they changed their linen undergarments, if they had them, and rubbed their bodies with dry cloths. Teeth were cleaned with twigs or rough cloth. Toothbrushes didn't exist. Dental problems were universal and often fatal. A simple tooth abscess could spread infection to the brain. People walked around with rotting teeth, bleeding gums, and constant pain. Personal hygiene was primitive beyond imagination. People relieved themselves in chamber pots that were emptied into streets. Public latrines were built over rivers or moats. The smell was overwhelming. Foreign visitors to 15th century cities described the stench as unbearable, even for people accustomed to poor sanitation. Everyone had parasites. Intestinal worms were so common that people considered them normal. Fleas, lice, and mites lived on human bodies permanently. There were no effective treatments. People simply accepted constant itching and the diseases these parasites carried. Fleas carried bubonic plague. Lice spread typhus. Mites caused scabies. These weren't occasional problems. They were permanent residents on human bodies. Your clean, modern skin would be a paradise for parasites that had evolved to thrive on unwashed human flesh. The psychological impact would be devastating. Imagine waking up every morning covered in insect bites, knowing that the creatures causing them were living in your clothes, your hair, your bedding. There was no escape, no treatment, no relief. Medicine in 1492 was based on balancing bodily humors. Doctors believed disease was caused by too much blood, bile, or phlegm. Their treatments involved bloodletting, purging, and inducing vomiting. If you got sick, the cure was often worse than the disease. Surgery was performed without anesthesia or antiseptic. Physicians used the same tools on multiple patients without cleaning them. Infection was almost guaranteed. Amputation was common for minor injuries that became infected. Pain management consisted of alcohol and opium, if you were lucky. Mental illness was treated with exorcism or confinement. Depression, anxiety, and trauma, conditions modern people suffer from regularly, were considered signs of demonic possession or moral weakness. There was no concept of psychological treatment or medication. Violence was casual and constant. Public executions were entertainment. Torture was legal and common. People carried weapons as everyday tools. Fights frequently ended in death, and legal systems were brutal and arbitrary. Women died in childbirth at shocking rates. Without modern medical intervention, complications that are easily treatable today were death sentences. Families expected to lose multiple children, and often the mother as well. Privacy didn't exist. People lived in single-room dwellings with their entire families and often their animals. Personal space was unknown. Noise, smells, and human bodily functions were constant, unavoidable realities. The sensory assault would drive you insane. Your brain, accustomed to controlled environments, would be overwhelmed by constant noise, offensive smells, and visual chaos. Your knowledge of modern medicine would be useless and dangerous. If you tried to explain germ theory or basic sanitation, you'd be considered insane or heretical. Your attempts to improve conditions would be met with suspicion and violence. Your body would begin failing within weeks. Your immune system, overwhelmed by constant pathogen exposure, would collapse. Your digestive system would rebel against contaminated food and water. Your skin would develop infections from parasite bites and poor hygiene. The diseases that killed medieval people didn't just kill, they tortured. Dysentery caused violent diarrhea that dehydrated victims to death. Tuberculosis slowly destroyed the lungs, causing victims to cough up blood for months before dying. Smallpox covered the body in oozing pustules that left survivors horribly scarred. Your modern diet and lifestyle have made you soft in ways you can't imagine. Your bones are weaker than 15th century bones. Your muscles are different. Your cardiovascular system is adapted to processed foods and sedentary life. The physical demands of Renaissance existence would break your body even if disease didn't kill you first. We've evolved, culturally and physically, to survive in clean environments with medical support. Strip that away, and we're as helpless as newborns. The people who survived in 1492 weren't just tougher than us. They were genetically different. 5 centuries of medical advancement have allowed people to survive and reproduce who would have died in medieval times. When you flip on a light switch, turn on a faucet, or take an antibiotic, you're not just using modern conveniences. You're using the tools that make your very existence possible. Without them, you wouldn't last a month in the world Columbus knew. The next time you feel nostalgic for simpler times, remember this. You're alive today because those times were so deadly that they killed off everyone who couldn't adapt. You're not descended from the majority who lived in Columbus's time. You're descended from the rare few who somehow survived long enough to pass on their genes. And even they would look at your soft, sanitized existence and know the truth. You could never survive in their world.